we're going to focus on developmental, but there are a lot of different disciplines you might want to draw on in your essay. Sociocultural, historical, social psychological, biological, and many, many more. Developmental psychology can give us a lot of insight into the mental health epidemic in young people, because developmental psychology is the study of development, both neurologically, socially, and psychologically. So let's take a look at how we might do this. So a big part of developmental psychology looks at brain changes, changes in the brain during adolescence and during childhood. This graph you'll see here focuses on neurodevelopmental changes in the brain during adolescence, and it shows the structural changes in the brain, specifically in the prefrontal regions of the brain, which is here. So we've got the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal lobe, and we can take away some aspects, some findings from this, which might explain why anxiety and depression are more likely to occur in adolescents and young people, as we've seen in previous lessons. So you can see here that it says, I'm going to point my cursor. So the darker bits of the graph represent increased risk. And because of the structural changes in the brain, particularly during adolescent brain development, this gives rise to heightened sensitivity to emotional responses. So essentially, adolescents are more likely to have emotional responses and be more sensitive to those responses, which might give rise to symptoms of anxiety and symptoms of depression. Similarly, the way that emotions are processed are different in adolescence. So you can look at brain scans again. There's an area of the brain called the amygdala that deals with emotional processing and response to threat cues. And as you can see here, in adolescence, the amygdala response to the threat cue is more than that of adults, but not to the safety cue. So essentially, adolescents are more in tune with threat cues, which are essentially cues that might make you anxious or that represent a threat. So it might be something like a danger, or it might be something like something that would make you worried. So that's something to bear in mind. Adolescents are essentially more likely to respond and react emotionally, physically, and psychologically to threat cues, again, which could lead to anxiety. And this obviously then correlates with what we see in terms of anxiety and depression in adolescence. So these differences in emotional processing can relate to emerging psychopathology or mental illness, such as anxiety and depression, both in children and in adolescents. So you can see here, there's an image of the right amygdala, which is responsible for the emotional processing. And this all links up with increased cases of anxiety and depression. So this is one way we can explain the epidemic of youth anxiety and depression.